This video is sponsored by Channel Fireball and brought to you thanks to my lovely patrons. Oh, bet you thought I was gonna come through the door, didn't you? I've got you pranked. Hello, spicy people of the internet. Spice8Rack here, aka please ignore this fucking thing on my lip. I have ulcers. And welcome back to the channel where we're going to be talking a little bit about the new Magic the Gathering stories coming out. We're going to be doing a little bit of a synopsis, a little bit of a story review, and then we're gonna end on a little conclusion. It's a good chill time. Enjoy yourself whilst you're here. Also repping my boy Not Corey's QFO merchandise. Big fan. Obviously it's a bit small on me. But that was completely on me. I ordered a small by accident, and then I didn't want to send it back because I really liked the design, and I also felt really bad. So as we do with these videos, we're going to quickly, before we get into reading the new story, which is called Episode 2, Race to the Murasa Skyclave by A.T. Greenblatt. What we're going to do is we're going to address a comment or two that we got on the last video. I keep saying we. It's me. I was the one who got these comments, not you. There are two main comments that I was getting. The first one was that right at the end of my last video, I was talking about how we're never shown Zendikar in, being in danger or being destroyed, or we're never given like a good reason to sort of like side with Akiri's mentality and Akiri's motive that she has, which is Zendikar is damaged and we need to be making an active, aggressive effort to heal it. People were saying in the comments that actually not being shown being shown that Zendikar is actually kind of... But that one just came out of nowhere. Didn't even have a build up to that train. Ruining that take. Neat. People were saying that maybe this was on purpose. We were being shown Zendikar being absolutely fine to prime us as an audience more to accept that Nahiri and Akiri's sort of like aggressive stance on the healing of Zendikar is actually the wrong thing. Is not the way we should be going about this. They are the bad people in this story. And I agree with that to a degree. Obviously, we're going to be, as an audience, expected, or at least sort of pushed to find Nahiri to be the villain in the story, to find her ideology and her perspective on Zendikar to be the wrong one, as it were, between her and Nissa. However, what we do also kind of need as an audience to understand a character is to be shown their motive. We obviously, like, Akiri has this in her head that Zendikar absolutely needs to be healed. We need to see something. We need to be given something, shown what she is basing that mentality on. We're not necessarily shown that she's simply basing it on the flashbacks that she had to the war. Obviously, she's got these flashbacks. She's remembering the damage the Eldrazi did. But for the vast majority of the story, she is actively saying how beautiful Zendikar is. Like, even though it's damaged, it's still super, super beautiful. So I feel we needed like one small nod to a very specific moment, very specific point in Zendikar, be it sort of like in Akiri's history or literally a geographical point that Akiri sort of like looks to as this is the manifestation of my motive, effectively. I still feel we needed a small amount of that, because then you can still take that small example and compare it to the rest of Zendikar and go, yes, obviously we need to fix this bit, but what you're doing is you're focusing on only the negative, but here is all of the positive that's happening in Zendikar, and then we can sort of like, as an audience and sort of like as the conflict progresses throughout the narrative, we can come to a greater understanding that Akiri is, her perspective has been warped by her involvement in the battle for Zendikar. So that was the first thing. I think the second thing that people were saying was that my reading montage that happens between sort of like this section and the synopsis isn't an actual montage because it's just sped up footage of me reading. And to that I say, fuck you. So yes, with those pieces of feedback dealt with, we are now going to move on to our actual reading of Episode 2, Race to the Murasa Skyclave by A.T. Greenblatt. I will say, not a massive fan of the naming convention for these stories. We've had, in the Heart of the Skyclave, Red Root, and now Race to the Murasa Skyclave. These feel very sort of descriptive, not particularly creative thus far. We could get some more descriptive, more imaginative names for these stories as time goes on. But I feel like, you know, we've had much more creative titles for Magic stories in the past, Magic free articles in fact, in the past, and it's just a shame that we're kind of getting pretty bare bones titles, very descriptive but not particularly creative. Also, yes, this is A.T. Greenblatt. So this is the person who wrote episode 1 in the Heart of the Skyclave. So I think what Wizards is doing is they're giving A.T. Greenblatt the sort of core Planeswalker story, and then either they're giving Miguel Lopez, I think that was his name, I will double check that, or I'll just put up a thing if I got it right or not. I think they're giving either him or a series of other writers these little sort of vignettes of secondary characters within Zendikar. I think that's a fine way of doing things. You keep one piece of writing very consistent. This is the core story, it's written by one person, but it's also supplemented by all of these either individual pieces written by individual people or a secondary narrative written by one other person. I think that's fun and fine. But yes, let's... Oh, and of course, this says episode 2 because it's the second episode in the Planeswalker, storyline, but it's the third story article to be released, so that's why this video is episode 3. Very confusing, not a fan, whatever. Let's give this a read. Hopefully, this will be a little bit better than In the Heart of the Skyclave, now that we've sort of come off of Red Root and we really enjoyed that. So let's give this a read. Oh, shit, hang on. I need to go and get my notepad. That was the story. Okay, so we have just read episode 2, Race to the Murasa Skyclave, sorry, by A.T. Greenblatt. Let's get into the synopsis, I guess, before I get on with my feedback. So, we follow Nahiri just after the original story, episode 1, In the Heart of the Skyclave. She has gotten the key that is going to open up the vault that contains the lithomological core, or whatever it is, that orb that she's going to use to change and supposedly heal Zendikar. So we pick up with her. She goes to Seagate. She's looking for a band of adventurers because she's realised that, I can get the core, but I had to do the Skyclave earlier with Nissa, and I only just managed to get the key then, so I kind of do need people with me. So she kind of begrudgingly goes and collects a group of adventurers, 2 of which are Akiri and Zareth. She collects 4 adventurers, goes to Seagate, meets them all. It's Akiri, Zareth, what are the other ones? Ubosh and Kaza, I think. Aura and Kaza. I don't know if Aura and Kaza are legendary creatures. If they are, I'll put them on screen. If not, then they're just very obvious red shirts. But yeah, so she goes to collect these adventurers, says, hey, I'm going to be looking for this lithomancy core, come join me. Zareth forces her to play a card game, kind of a bit like a mixture of Ring of Fire and the card game you play when you're trying to convince a villager to come stay in your island in Animal Crossing. You pick a card, it's got a word on it, you got to tell a story about that word, and if you tell a good enough story, you win the card, and then whoever has the most cards wins the game. It's a weird game. I'll get more into that in my review, what I think about that. But yeah, she wins the game. Zareth isn't particularly pleased. He's also a little bit concerned about, hey, this lady, I don't know, she says she wants to heal Zendikar, and Akiri's all about that, but I've got my doubts, you know? So he, says to some other core, the person who's in charge of his expedition house, listen, I've got doubts about Nahiri. If I can get you that key, can you just like sell it off on the black market to like some like idiot collector who isn't actually going to use it? Just because I'm not sure we want this lithomancy core to be used at all. Who is the person? Who's the name of the person? Just so I can remember it. Ksenia. Zarath says to Zakenya. Zarath says to Ksenia, I'm gonna steal the key to the lithomancy core, and I'm gonna get it to you. Then we cut to the expedition party, so it's all of the people who were playing the game and Nahiri. Nahiri has recruited them. They're going to the Murasa. Is it Murasa? Just got to keep checking this to make sure I'm not speaking out my arse. Yes, to the Murasa Skyclave. There's a little bit of like a tears. Zarath says to Akiri, hey, I don't trust Nahiri. Also, Akiri and Nahiri, that's just gonna be a mistake that I make throughout the entire of these episodes. But Zarath says to Akiri, I don't trust Nahiri. And then is all like, how do we even know that the lithomancy core works? What does it even do? And then Akiri like turns around and just vaporizes a cat. Like a cat that was gonna, like a big jungle cat that was gonna kill Zarath, but she just like turns around and goes, pew, and then like this predatory cat just turns to dust. Then says like effectively, see, I've got the power, that's what it do. And then they all go up to Murasa. We cut to Jace, who turns up on Seagate. He's looking for Nahiri. He's wandering around, he gets recognized as a war hero by a couple of people. Eventually he just says, I'm tired of this, becomes a merfolk, makes himself a merfolk illusion, goes to talk to Ksenia and asks, have you seen Nahiri? She obviously has, but she doesn't want to, there's sort of like a privacy thing with these expedition houses. You don't just sort of like say where people have gone. You don't just say where a patron is taking an expedition, because otherwise, of course, you could just have people like nipping in and like stealing things or whatever. But she sort of relents because Zarath had already talked to her and said, I don't trust Nahiri. And now Jace has turned up and says, I don't trust Nahiri. I need to know where she is. So she sends him to Murasa. I mean, she actually just writes the word Murasa on a bit of paper and gives it to Jace. But he knows to go to the Murasa Skyclave, obviously because the Skyclaves are where Nahiri is getting her stuff from. He turns up at the bottom of one of them, kind of bumps into like this horrible fungus monster who almost kills him, but thankfully Nissa turns up and beats the fungus monster to death with an elemental. And then they link up and say, right, let's get up to the Skyclave and let's stop Nahiri. And that's the story. It's not good. Okay, it's not terrible. I don't know. I didn't notice any spelling mistakes this time, so that's a positive. It's not as concise and tight as in the Heart of the Skyclave, and that in of itself wasn't like the most efficient and well packaged narrative. I'll go through some of my thoughts. Like just opening up, like I've talked a lot about show don't tell, which also like in the previous videos, which is just where you want to show a character in a state or in an emotional state. You don't want to just tell an audience a character is feeling this certain way or a character does this in a malicious way. You want to show why is it malicious? How do we know it's malicious? And the reason that you want to do that is because it not only paints a more visual picture in an audience's head, they grab onto a scene a lot more if there is this concrete, this is how this is happening. But it also shows that you trust a reader. There's a lot of trust that goes into the relationship between an author and a reader. As an author, you are trusting your reader to like get what you mean. When you're writing a narrative, when you're writing a story, you want them to understand. You're trusting them to understand your point of view and what you intended to sort of like get out of the story, for them to get out of the story rather. And by showing emotion as it happens in a creative and descriptive way, you're trusting the audience to then extrapolate that emotion from that action. And it's fun. It's like a little each interaction between a character is a little puzzle for an audience as they go, okay, what is the emotion that I'm sort of like I'm trying to draw from this? It's just fun. And this starts with Nahiri was pleased and also infuriated. Pleased because the ancient key was snug in her pocket, the solution to her problem close at hand. Infuriated because her most recent adventure with Nissa made it abundantly clear she could not visit the Murasa Skyclave alone and hope to survive. As much as she'd like to think otherwise, if Nissa hadn't been in the Akum Skyclave with her, she wouldn't have been able to obtain the key. And there's a lot of just telling going on here. We are straight up told Nahiri is feeling these two ways. And then we're explained why she's feeling these two ways. And then on top of that, we have this weird narrative redundancy where we get the infuriated because her most recent adventure with Nissa made it abundantly clear she could not visit the Murasa Skyclave alone and hope to survive. Long sentence, bam, she's infuriated, this is the reason, and she's infuriated, this is the reason, and then it's followed on by the sentence, as much as she'd like to think otherwise, if Nissa hadn't been in the Akum Skyclave with her, she wouldn't have been able to obtain the key. But that is literally the same sentence we've just read. Her most recent adventure with Nissa made it abundantly clear she could not visit the Murasa Skyclave alone and hope to survive. Nahiri's adventure with Nissa had proved to Nahiri that she can't just roll up to a Skyclave solo and hope to do everything just like on her own. And that's swiftly followed by, if Nissa hadn't have been in that Skyclave, she wouldn't have been able to do what she wanted. And it's like, it's the same sentence. It's very redundant, which didn't bode well, frankly, for the rest of the read. I must admit, when you get that sort of like an introductory paragraph and you just kind of, you have these like immediate sort of like blunt issues. Yeah, Akiri turns up to Seagate. There were some nice moments as she's wandering around Seagate, where I think there's like this, a good example of us being shown that Nahiri thinks herself more than like these lesser people who are just wandering around, these lesser adventurers. She walks past this memorial to Seagate, the original Seagate, because of course it got destroyed by Kozilek and Lulabog. And it's this sort of like these, was it six? Yeah, it's 6 massive hedrons that are sort of suspending this piece of the original Seagate's like wreckage, just sort of like in the air, and people are like praying to it and wishing their passed on comrades well in the afterlife and stuff like that. And Nahiri says, unlike the citizens of this city, Nahiri didn't need a huge monument to remind her of what she'd lost. Now that's quite efficient in so much that like it's not only telling us, the audience, that potentially if you've just like picked up the story, this is the first story you've read, you are being told, okay, Nahiri's lost a lot, obviously. But also, unlike the citizens of the city, Nahiri didn't need a huge monument to remind her of what she lost. That smacks of self-importance. That smacks of, I don't require your sort of like your fancy statues and your like hovering pieces of destroyed lighthouse to remind me of what I've lost. It shows that Nahiri has this sense of superiority over these people, which I like. That was a very, very good little bit of efficient storytelling. Nice. We then get Nahiri meeting with these 4 adventurers that Ksenia has sort of like brought together in the pub. And it's very obvious, like, we just met Akiri and Zareth in the last episode, in the last story, but there's also some person called Kaza and some person called Aura who are given very short descriptions. And you know when you're like reading Game of Thrones and you're wondering, oh, which one of these characters is gonna die? I can't tell. I'm getting this like story built up about this character, but I know that like main characters can just bite it out of absolutely nowhere. So are you gonna die? Are you gonna die? With this, it's like I've got Aura, a core cleric with a long white beard and a library's worth of knowledge within his head. 1 sentence introduction. Aura's fucking dead. Like, Aura's dead in the next one. It's going to go Aura, it's going to go Kaza, and then it's going to go Zareth, and then it's going to go Akiri. I can already call it. That's exactly how, like, the people are going to die. That's our bullet point list. there's a weird amount of disparity between the characterization of Akiri and Zareth in our previous story, The Red Root, and how they're being characterized here. Specifically with Zareth, a lot of these characters don't feel like they have their own voice necessarily. Like, I can't really tell, for example, like Aura and Kaz's dialogue, I can't tell them apart until I see, like, Kaza said, Aura said after the piece of dialogue. There's no, like, I don't, like, for example, the damage to this world, said Akiri, is immense. I lost my entire family to the Eldrazi, Aura said quietly. I lost friends, Kaza said. Like, here we have a perfect moment to, like, demonstrate what it is about Zendikar that these people hold dear. Aura is this cleric. Kaza is this wizard who we do get a nice little bit of characterization later on in the piece of dialogue for Kaza specifically. That's why I think Aura's going to bite it first. But like, Aura is this cleric who's lost family. Yes, but Akiri's focus is entirely on like the damage to this world. So we're shown, okay, so Akiri cares about this world more so than like casualties necessarily. And then we get Aura is just kind of a bland, I lost my family, and then Kaza just literally says, I lost friends. Like, what about, like, I lost my school? I lost my classmates, maybe. I don't know, like, what kind of background Kaza has as, like, this fire mage. And we just don't get anything. Aura, I lost my, I lost my church. Like, something a little bit that shows us a little bit more about this character. That, like, paints more of a backstory. And then we get this card game, which I must admit, when I first read it, I was skeptical, and then I finished reading the piece, and I was still skeptical. Zareth explains the rules. It works like this, says Zareth, a card is chosen at random. At his words, a card from the, like, there's a spinning ring of cards on the table. At his words, a card from the spinning ring slid into the center and flipped over. It was a beautiful drawing of an intricate motif of gems and eyes. You don't need to say beautiful. It's like, it was an intricate motif of gems and eyes. We can probably assume that it's quite beautiful from that. On the center was a single word, cunning. And then we have to tell a true story about how we accomplished the word on the card. If your story isn't impressive enough, another player has a chance to capture the card. And then you, like, whoever wins the most cards wins. And it's like, okay, so it's a magical card set that, like, determines if a story is impressive enough? No, it's just people just say a story based on this word and then they just pick up the card. At no point does anyone go, this is my story, and then someone else goes, that wasn't very impressive, and then takes the card from them or anything like that. It's literally just like story time. And it feels like there's some good moments in this. For example, it ends with Akiri turning all the cards to granite when the card Power turns up, I think it is. Yes. Which is great. That's like her showing her power, effectively. That's very much show don't tell. The rest of it is mono tell, though. It's just like, card comes up and it's a word, and then we get a story from Zareth about how he's a thief, which is just like an excuse for us to find out that Zareth is a thief if you hadn't read the previous story. And then you get, like, the story about, like, you've got Kaza who gets a story, but it's weird because Kaza doesn't get to say her story. Like, everyone, Zareth and Nahiri mainly are doing the stories. Kaza just gets, I want to play too, said Kaza as she scooted her seat closer to the table. Her card read victory. Also, like, Kaza, like, you know, read a room. You're third wheeling here a little bit between Zareth and Nahiri. There's obviously something going on here. Just scooting up. I want to play the game. Kaza launched into a tale about how she once destroyed an entire Eldrazi brood with a handful of spells and one well-placed exploding vial. And it's like, Kaza doesn't even get a chance to say her story. We're just sort of passively told that this is what Kaza was doing. Which, I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of this whole section, I must admit. It's good for, like, setting up, Zareth gets kind of, like, humiliated here, and that's a good way of setting up his and Nahiri's conflict. But I just think that the conceit of this scene was a bit strange, and I wasn't really here for it. We then follow on to probably the weirdest part of this story, which, you know, everyone's going to this Murasa Skyclave, And Zareth says, and how do we know this call will even work? Nahiri turned towards him and went still, her whole expression and her posture becoming hard as stone. For one terrible moment, Akiri thought she was going to attack Zareth. She instinctively coiled back to move into action, but Nahiri was quicker. With one blow of movement, Nahiri withdrew the shining key from her pocket, held it upward to Zareth, and spoke a word Akiri didn't understand. Akiri rushed forwards, but was halted by a flash so bright she needed to shield her eyes. "Zareth!" she shouted, panicked. It was one long, agonising second for her vision to clear. When it did, Akiri noticed two things. First, Zareth was standing in the same place, unharmed and blinking too. Akiri exhaled, relief flooding through her. Second, there was a large angry stomper hovering mid-leap behind Zareth, frozen in place. Its mouth was open, exposing its long fangs. Two of its 6 legs were inches from him, ready to pounce. And then, so first off, before I get to the really confusing bit, I do want to say I like how this plays with our expectations. Because we've watched the Zendikar trailer, and we know that Zareth, if you haven't watched the Zendikar trailer, spoilers, we know that Zareth gets killed because of the lithomancy core, and he gets turned into a statue. And so here in this moment, when I was reading this, I thought, oh, is this going to be where Zareth actually dies, and there's a little bit of a difference between how it happens in the trailer and how it happens in the story? Because that's kind of what I've come to expect from Magic Story in the last 3 or 4 years. Not 3 or 4 years, 2 or 3 years. That the trailer and the story just do not match at all. So I was expecting Zareth to actually be dead here for a moment, and then when it wasn't, it was a genuine surprise and a genuine reveal. I like how that has taken this negative association we've had with the Magic Story, this expectation for inconsistency, and kind of used that against at least me specifically. In this moment where I was expecting inconsistency, but then it turns out, no, actually, maybe we are going to get some consistency. I like that. I thought that was really, really fun. But then we get this very, very strange bit after the cat just dissolves into dust, which Akiri doesn't question. From the corner of her eye, she saw something move. She turned and spotted a dark spot swelling under one of the nearby trees, right where Nahiri had used the key. It looked like a tentacle of black sand. It grew slowly, twisting its way around the trunk, withering leaves, branches, and bark, transforming them into something rigid and immovable, like stone. Akiri shivered. There were many things in this world she didn't understand, and this was one of them. Akiri? What? Akiri's whole thing is Zendikar has been damaged. We need to heal this world. And then this fucking lady turns up and is like, yo, I've got this thing that's going to heal the world. Come along. And the first time we see this thing's, a fraction of this thing's power be used, it dissolves an animal, and then it turns a tree into some horrible, tentacled stone, thing. At that point, you don't just go, and continue packing your bag and follow this lady. You go, hang on. You said this thing's going to heal the world, right? And that's my whole deal. It looks a lot like worse than Eldrazi shit is happening when you use this thing. That was a really confusing moment for me. And the fact that it just gets brushed off with, there's lots of stuff that Akiri just doesn't understand. Hey, what are you gonna do? It's I feel like Akiri is travelled enough, learned enough to maybe understand that if a magical artifact causes a tree to turn into a black tentacle stone thing, maybe don't use the thing that has more power, more of this similar power, to try and save the world, because it could just turn it all into horrible black tentacle stone things. That was a really, really confusing moment. I've just realised I said people speak inconsistently, and I never actually addressed that, because there's a part a little bit earlier. Yes, there's a part a little bit earlier where Zareth is talking to Ksenia. And, God, that joke's going to get old really quickly. There's a part where Zareth is talking to Ksenia earlier about this expedition. She said she was going to change Zendikar with it, talking about the lithomancy thing. Said Zareth, return it to the way it was before the Eldrazi were imprisoned here. Ksenia gave a small laugh. You make that sound like a bad thing, trickster. You've seen those ancient ruins, he replied sharply, the anger he'd been bottling up all day beginning to leak out. Do you think there will be any place for people like us in a world of fortresses and armies? And it's like, that's a completely legitimate observation, and if we didn't have Red Root, I'd have said, yeah, that's actually like, that's a good way of setting up an additional layer of Zareth's conflict with Nahiri. First, she embarrasses him in this game, and then he's like thinking about, well, actually, is this quest to return Zendikar to a former glory actually compatible with me and like people like me? The issue is, in the previous story, we were shown that Zareth really didn't like know that much about like these Skyclaves and about even like Hedrons. Like, he calls the Hedrons like big rocks, and he doesn't even like necessarily know that they are like artifacts of any great import. So how does he know that the Skyclaves are like ancient core fortresses full of soldiers, or like ancient core fortresses that will procure or that will house soldiers? Like, that seems really inconsistent with the character that we have just been shown in our previous story. So I wasn't super a fan of that. I really think that there could have been a little bit more communication between this writer and the writer of Red Root as to like what the characterization of these characters are, because there is a lot of inconsistency going on here. However, that being said, there has obviously been some communication in terms of like narrative, because there isn't any inconsistencies between the stories, which is a delight and excellent, and I'm really, really happy about that, because again, inconsistency has kind of been the norm. So like a little bit more communication I think could have been useful for the characterization, but overall, I'm pretty chill with this. Then we get Jace. Jace's stuff is fine. I don't really have anything to say about it. It's weird. He gets like recognized as being a war hero, but only by one person. But it's like the instant he turns up on Seagate, someone recognizes him as a war hero, and then nobody else in the entire story recognizes him as a war hero. Whilst he's like walking through Seagate, which I found a little bit strange. That kind of felt a little bit sort of like shoved in there without too much thought. The fight between him and the fungus monster, again, it's fine. It's kind of frustrating. The story, a lot of the stuff that is fine is just fine. There's nothing really that like jumps out at me necessarily that isn't like bad stuff, which is unfortunate, because like in Skyclaves there were a couple of like really interesting and like fun moments. Actually, no, I do tell a lie. There was something that I really, really did like. The description of Murasa from Jace's perspective. I really, really liked this section. I won't read the whole thing because it's a little bit wordy, and my also really hurts. If you haven't been able to tell, talking is a little bit of a problem for me right now. Also, the lighting is terrible. These are very casual videos. What are you gonna do? I really liked the description of the Skyclave. It felt very real. It felt very concrete. I could very much picture Jace like slodging his way through. Slodging is a great word that I just made up. Slodging his way through this like landscape and being sort of like a little bit worried about having to like climb all the way up to the Skyclave up there. There's also this really nice. I get like a little bit of like a little bit of like, I guess, condensed storytelling. We get this moment where Jay says, "Well, I do love a challenge," he said. If his time on Ixalan had taught him anything, it was how to build calluses on his hands. Obviously, we can't talk about... Jace's experiences in Ixalan are very relevant to him traipsing through Murasa, but we don't necessarily, as an audience, or necessarily as a writer, want to detail his entire quest right now. We don't necessarily want to go into great detail about what Jace's time on Ixalan was all about and all like for him. But this is a perfectly fine, like a perfectly good way, an efficient way of just explaining everything that happened to Jace on Ixalan in a very simple capacity. It was how to build calluses on his hands. It's hard work on Ixalan. He had to do a lot of like manual shit that he was not used to, and he has now grown as a person as a result and is more adept at traversing if not these kinds of landscapes, then generally more inhospitable landscapes in a physical capacity. Really, really lovely line. I love that. I did tell a lie when I said things don't jump out at me. This was a really, really lovely line, and I think this is like, yeah, this stuff. Great. Mwah, love it. Ow. Ow, I just touched the ulcer. God damn it. And then to like drawing to a close of like the feedback, there's one bit which it's kind of, it's not great. I think it's a bad line, but it's not like so bad it's good or anything like that. I'll just read it to you because it reads like, I know, it reads like a valley girl. Nissa turns up and saves Jace from being killed by a fungus monster. We didn't think Jace was going to get killed by a fungus monster, but like, I'll tell you what, fucking Jace might not get killed by a fungus monster, but I might fucking kill a fucking train! We knew that Jace wasn't going to get killed by a fungus monster. Nissa shows up and saves him. And then we get this, like, Jace is like complimenting the elemental that Nissa creates to save him. We get this bit. It is impressive, Jace admitted. It is Zendikar, said Nissa stiffly. Of course it is. Internally, Jace kicked himself. I didn't mean to imply. I know, she said softly. The elementals are just ... really important to me. and I'm like, it just feels like elementals are just like really important to me. And I don't know, it read like that to me. It felt very, very strange. We know, like, Jace knows how important nature and elementals are to Nissa. Jace has been in the Gatewatch with Nissa for years. Jace has been on Zendikar with Nissa before. Like, Jace knows. And it feels really strange for Nissa to just go like, yeah, these things are really important to me. It would be a little bit like if in the 4th John Wick movie, like, John Wick talked to, like, the fucking, what's his name? Winston. And, like, Winston's just like, are you doing all right, John? And John's just like, I'm just really upset about my wife. And it's like, yeah, dude, we know. We've seen like 3 movies of this thus far. You don't need to tell us about that anymore. We kind of get it, you know? Nissa, you don't need to tell us you love elementals. And certainly not in like that way. I don't know. But overall, I can't say I'm enamored by this story. But again, as I think I'm going to say with every single story, this is leagues better than the paid for novels. In terms of like format as well, the fact that these are bite-sized, when I'm reading this and I'm not finding myself super enjoying it or just kind of wanting to get a little bit to the end, it's a 1,000, 2,000 words short story effectively. It could be like even less than that potentially. No, it'll probably be a bit more than that. It'll probably be like a 4,000 word short story. I'm waiting to get to the end of this, but then I've got a week. I've got a week to like do whatever I want. It's not like a chapter in a 400-page book that I'm just going, okay, that's one chapter done. I've got to read the other one now. Like, and I feel really, really bad. I'm sure that A.T. Greenblatt is a very talented writer. There are just some like glaring issues in this that me personally, and again, art is very subjective. So if you do not agree with my my feedback here, then that is completely legitimate. And in fact, I would ask that you present your opinion in the comments below. Boost my engagement. But yes, that's kind of what I feel about the story. I must admit, I'm a lot more excited to see Friday's piece. I'll try and get this out tomorrow because it's currently 9 p.m. I won't edit this super, super heavily. But yes, thank you so much for watching this. That's kind of my review of this piece, and we will see how the story progresses. So anyway, I've been Spice8Rack. I've been in a lot of pain, and as always, stay spicy. A massive thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon, who lets me continue to make these videos, and a special thank you to all of my $10 patrons, and gosh, there's a lot of you right now. Thank you so much for that, by the way, who include 7th Guest, a Fool of 5 Colours, a gay American couple, a socialist hobgoblin, Ace of Heartsu, Adam Gable, AJ Ingram, Alex Berman, Alex Flynn, Alex Wood, Alice Paralis, an alt-right sleeper agent who gives money to communists Buka Idika, an Umbreon Pastry, Anthony G. Reap, Bambi Roper, Ben Pike, Biscuit Blade, Blake Evers, Bradley Rose, Brian Dunn, Bro Yoti, Bruno, Captain Colostomy, Carl Comstock, Chase Beard, Chris DeVos, Cloud Chaser Kestrel, Corwin Stoddard, Causa, Darius Rudeminer, Dennis, Dollar Wen, Drew Pierce, Distopico, Exidian, Erica Hamel, Ethan Abraham, Future Beagle, Grey Days, Hooper Dupp. I am saying this only because our global economic system does not intrinsically support artistic expression. In response, I bolt myself, Jake Colburn, Jessica Settle, John Solog, Joshua M. Stephan, Jude Big Boy, Julie Bunn, Carlia Whithart, Kansas to Jesus, Kate B, Ken O'Dies, Kevin Quinn, Kurt Ape Apologizer, Kite Moonwall, Kyle Van Linden, Lachlan McAllister, Liliana Vest, Queen of Discard, Lily Lord, Literally a Ghost That Pushes Over Candles, Linnea, Magic Arcanum, Mike Mavramatis, Mr. Skolaton, Mooney Mon, No Bluffs, Ori, Patrick Perry, Professor Volpin, Raghava Cavalli, Riley Everett, Ross King, Rowan Brown, Sean Cayoso Riley, Sage Morrison, Sasha Evelyn Francis, Silent Celine, Sir Shaunsey, Sky Bear Games, Sky Johnson, Some Twink that simps super hard for spice. I love that name, excellent. Star Chaser, Swan Hunter, Taylor Street, the best Swans player in Montreal, Tic Tac Bobo, Tired Crow, Totally a Spy, Travis K, True Lily, Vittorio Grace, Vladimir Gorvikov, Xenon, and Zada's Ludo Narrative Dissonance. Thank you all so much for continuing to support the channel. Thank you to all of my lovely patrons, and thank you to you for watching, and I hope you have an absolutely lovely day.